What up, what up, what up, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. Happy Thursday. I hope everybody is making it through all of the craziness of this week A-OK, and safe and sound with your family and your loved ones, no matter where you may be watching from in the world today. It has obviously been an insanely heavy on our hearts news week in so many different ways. And while we took yesterday to talk about something a little bit more lighthearted with our friend Joe Bob, comedy expert and very fun guy to spend time with, he was so happy to join the stream, by the way. He had so much fun getting to spend some time with you guys. On Tuesday, we streamed for about 3.5 hours about everything that is happening in the Middle East this week. And we are back on the subject today because truly this is one of the most important subjects of my lifetime and is easily one of the single greatest human rights atrocities I have ever witnessed. I'm sure many of you feel the same way. Even if you are much older than myself, those who are saying nothing are using that as an opportunity to make a statement in and of itself, I believe, this week. And you should be paying attention to who is saying something and who is saying nothing. And although many people are talking about this around the world right now, the truth is the amount of extreme misinformation or even outright lies about where this conflict started, about the origins of this conflict, or even what's happening during this week is so truly astounding that we all have an obligation to speak up. It doesn't matter if you feel like everybody else is talking too much about it. It doesn't matter if you have 500 million followers or 500 followers on the social media platforms and video platforms that you have. If you have an opportunity to try to tell the truth in a world that is rejecting that very concept, just like we do for every other subject that we talk about here on the stream, but particularly about something that is truly so devastating and controversial during this week when we really need it, you absolutely need to seize that opportunity. And that is what we are doing through all of my content this week. Obviously, it hasn't been entirely well received. And I told you guys a little bit yesterday about what some of that backlash has looked like for me. I've specifically had to tell my parents and my future in-laws, whatever you guys do, I know you guys love watching my content. Don't read my comments on Instagram. It's just not really worth it. A lot of the DMs that I've gotten and many other creators have gotten by speaking up about this have just been truly heinous. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how truly disgusting a lot of the things that people feel comfortable saying behind screens really are. And I certainly don't say that to make you feel sorry for me. I wear it like a badge of honor. And we talk about that a lot here on the stream, that you probably aren't doing the right thing if you are receiving the praise of the world. But when you get a lot of the backlash from the world for seeking the truth and being willing to share it with others, that's probably a sign that you are going in the right direction. So I'm just going to keep going. And if I lose followers over that, or I lose subscribers over that, okay, that's part of the journey, and that's not really why I'm in this business and why I do what I do. But I think there's a really unique opportunity right before our very eyes this week in the midst of extreme, probably the most extreme division and hatred for one another and the most extreme loss of humanity for one another. Again, regardless of politics, regardless of where you're coming from religiously, regardless of where you're watching in the world, I think we can all agree on that feeling of being unsettled about this lack of humanity we're seeing. We have this unique opportunity not just to tell the truth, but to try to find the humanity in one another and to try to bring back some sense of a shared experience, knowing that every single human being on the face of this planet was created by God with a purpose and with an intention, that he looked around at every blade of grass and every star in the sky and said that the world needed one of you too. And sadly, while our world is very much governed by evil and governed by sin, and we see the results of that happening in real time more and more with each passing day, there's still an opportunity for us to pray for one another, even our enemies, even those who persecute us, and to try to create unity in an increasingly divided world all over the planet and all over the globe. So that's what we are trying to do. A lot of people really don't want us to do that, and a lot of people are very upset with the information that we've been sharing because they are buying into a lot of this rhetoric, but no matter, no fear. That is what we are going to do nonetheless. I will say to each and every one of you watching, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you guys are doing for helping to support my content and my journey as a content creator. This is true well outside of just this subject that we are talking about, but truly as an independent live streamer and an independent content creator and an independent author, every single time you guys like one of these streams, it could look like a little thumbs up button or a little heart wherever you are watching. When you ring that notification notification bell so that you always know when we are going live, or we always know when we are uploading new videos. And when you guys take literally half a second out of your life to hit the follow or subscribe button on any one of these platforms that we are currently live on, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, Getter, or on Locals, I hope you guys know that that truly does make such an impact, not just for my livelihood and my career as an independent content creator and someone who would very much pride herself on being a seeker of truth in our generation that really needs that, but in a much bigger scale, helping to bring countercultural and truth-based conversations to people who really desperately need to hear it the most, and who the algorithm might not necessarily reach without all of your guys' help. So thank you so very much for every single one of you hitting that subscribe button, hitting that follow button, and helping to share this stream with others so that we can create new conversations that are truly so meaningful in our very broken and upside down and messed up world that continues to get a little more upside down and messed up with every passing day. I'm also incredibly grateful to have a handful of sponsors that help to make this stream financially possible. You guys know I do this out of the spare bedroom of my house, so like there's no huge production budget. We don't have a huge advertising budget. How I'm able to do this for my full-time job every day is because of some very generous companies and individuals who help to make that happen. And one of those are our friends over at Public Square, who I've been so fortunate to work with as a creator for a very long time, long before they were ever a national company, long before they were ever publicly traded. And now, if you guys are familiar with Public Square, you might know that they are an American network of more than 65,000 plus small businesses, all of whom are pro-life, pro-freedom, and pro-family. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they share our values, and that has never been more important to support people and businesses and companies that share your values. Far more important than posting something on the internet, for example, and sometimes even how you vote in an election is voting with your dollar and being a conscious consumer and making sure that we are continuing to change culture and the economy and the products that we use as much as we are trying to change the laws that govern our country and our world at large. Public Square has literally everything from the food that you eat and things that can be delivered to you that way, to coffee shops and gyms in your area, clothing companies that you can support, skincare and makeup, and everything else you can possibly think of. You can check out their entire network of more than 65,000 plus small businesses on their website at publicsq.com. And we also just dropped a link in our chat for that, or you can download their app, Public SQ, on the Apple App Store or on Google Play. I am incredibly honored and excited today to be interviewing. We actually filmed the interview this morning because of the time difference. I'll explain that here in just a second. But to be interviewing a very, very well-renowned and internationally recognized human rights expert and political analyst and journalist who is Palestinian himself. He grew up the first 33 years of his life in a United Nations refugee camp in Palestine. At the time when he was born, it was governed by the Kingdom of Jordan, but in Palestine, and he now lives in East Jerusalem. He has spent his entire adult life and career fighting for human rights and serving as an activist internationally and globally, trying to draw attention to human rights atrocities that are happening in the Middle East. And interestingly, he kind of had a big shift in his career, originally fighting against Israeli oppression from his point of view on the Palestinian people from a human rights perspective, and really had a huge paradigm shift when he started to realize the amount of corruption and true terrorism that was happening within the governance structure over Palestinian individuals from the government that they had chosen for themselves. And so hearing his experience is just so profoundly moving. He is very, very well respected around the world. He speaks on college campuses and to human rights groups and legal professional groups all over the world every single year. And I was able to meet him for the first time this morning officially, which was phenomenal. He lives in East Jerusalem today. So obviously with the time difference, we had to record our interview several hours ago. I was up and ready to go at about 5 a.m. my time on the East Coast, which was about 1 o'clock p.m. in Jerusalem. And I'm very excited to share that interview here with you in just a second after we provide some updates on everything that is happening in the region today. But I put together this interview because I've been getting so many requests on Instagram and on TikTok and even on the stream here to create an opportunity for dialogue with somebody who is not necessarily a Jewish Israeli citizen that wants to share their experience about what's happening this week, which was so profound and moving that we were able to facilitate on the stream on Tuesday with my friend friend Mira, who also lives in Jerusalem. She is a Jewish Israeli citizen and was able to shed some light on what this is like and how it feels to have the most Jews killed in a single day since the Holocaust, which is just an astounding, crazy, very, very sad reality to try to wrap your head around. But many people have been asking for a different perspective, or maybe an opportunity for dialogue with somebody who is ethnically Palestinian or who is not a Jewish Israeli citizen. And so we were able to put this interview together, and I'm absolutely shocked that Bassem Eid was able to email us back so quickly. As soon as we requested the interview, he said, absolutely, America needs to know what is happening, and your media is so far beyond mischaracterizing and telling the truth, beyond telling the truth in all of the wrong ways. I would gladly come on anytime. Let's make it happen and try to tell the truth to people who desperately need to hear it most. So I'm very excited to be sharing that with you guys here in just a little bit. I'm going to say hi to some people in our live chat as we are getting started with this important discussion today. Then we'll provide some updates on everything that is happening on the ground this week, especially since Tuesday, because a lot has happened in the last 48 hours. Probably where we go from here and what's truly going on. I have a lot to say, so buckle up. It might get a little controversial, but hopefully I am going to challenge you to challenge your perspectives a little bit here and think bigger than I have to be right about this politically. I need to prove a point politically, or I need to pick this side politically because that's where I need to be because I'm always there. Let's try to think a little bit bigger than that when it comes to the true humanitarian crisis that we are seeing unfold before our very eyes, and try to find the humanity in one another when that is the least popular thing to do this week. If you haven't already introduced yourself to us or let us know where you're watching over in the live chat, that will be great. And we're going to kick things off over on YouTube today. Total Package and Dutch Canadian are watching. We've got Patrick and Searching for a Way here. Los Ravosa is watching, and thank you so much for being here from Europe. Nintendo Fan and Northern Wanderer are here. OD, Leon, and Amain is back. Good to see you guys. We've got Amplified Truth. Don M is watching, and Unbear is joining us in the live chat. Over on Rumble, we've got Gank, Justin, Tuco Wright watching. Coral Gate is here, and Bidian is watching, and many, many more. Over on Getter, we've got Nitty Witty and Super Op kicking us off in the chat. Charles is watching. Lakeshore is joining us, and many others. And the Locals gang is out with a bang. We've got Crazy Cat Lady, Alex Padron, Mountain Lover, Magic Def all tuning in. It's so good to see you guys. Tito is here. M-Rock's jumping in. We've got Caitlin watching from Georgia. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. And I hope, just as we said on Tuesday, before we got into any of the controversial stuff, even if you walk away from this stream feeling like you didn't agree with literally anything that was said, I hope and pray that in a time where we really need to do this, you can let your guard down a little bit to have your perceptions challenged and your perspectives challenged about this extremely difficult to explain. We would never be able to do that on a stream, but also truly controversial subject that is demanding a search at the very least for objective truth, which in my opinion is not that difficult to find, especially if you're seeking moral clarity on where the world needs to move forward from the absolutely heinous human rights atrocities that we've seen roll out before our very eyes. For whatever reason, people are so quick to spread hatred or division or just all out lies on social media this week to a degree and to a level that I have really never grappled with in my time as a content creator, and really in my lifetime as a 26-year-old American citizen who's very well traveled. And I've been very fortunate to be able to travel all over the world. The level of othering that I'm seeing with humanity this week, meaning looking at somebody who approaches one particular issue differently than you and all of a sudden deciding that they are not another human being, or they certainly aren't a human being on par with the same level that you are a human being, is absolutely mind-blowing. And for whatever reason, I think we are allowing our humanity to be predicated on having a shared opinion on even just one subject, let alone any other political, religious, social, or cultural subject, to a degree that I have never seen before in my lifetime as an American citizen, as a Christian, as somebody who has been very fortunate to interact with cultures from all over the world. And if you are not massively concerned by the lack of humanity that you are seeing from so many people on social media, in mainstream media, and on the internet, I hope that this stream allows you to realize the need for our shared humanity and the need for true unity in our divided, very, very broken, falling apart world today. I've found this observation in the last few days, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this as well, but it's certainly been something I've been slowly observing since Saturday, and seems to be ramping up like this snowball rolling down a hill that I never really would have expected, but does seem to make a bit of sense to me. I've noticed that many even limited government-oriented, traditional values-oriented, conservative people, rightfully so in many ways because of their experience, but wrongfully so in this situation, have been so quick to denounce any aid, even humanitarian aid, to Israel and the literal thousands of people that have been massacred by an internationally recognized terrorist organization. We've been so quick to denounce real footage that is put out by said terrorist organization, and we've been so quick to say this is all propaganda or this is all some sort of fake injustice, when we're literally watching videos of this happening in real time. We're getting confirmation from governments all over the world that this actually is happening in real time. We are getting confirmation from citizens on the ground in various aspects of this conflict that this is all happening in real time. And I've just noticed this group of probably well-meaning, I'm hopeful, conservatives and traditional values-oriented people, and many Christians even, who have been so quick to say either I don't want to get involved, this is not my problem, so we shouldn't get involved, or all of this is fake and it doesn't really exist, that I'm really concerned about that. And as I've noticed this unfolding in the last several days, I've come to the conclusion that I think many conservatives are so quick to fight globalism, or what they perceived to be globalism, even if it isn't truly globalism, rightfully so, because we should be fighting against globalism, and we should be fighting against a one world government, and we should be fighting against the World Economic Forum and a idea of an all-powerful UN. Rightfully so, that we assume protecting American interests, recovering hostage American citizens, and making sure that American interests are protected from terrorist groups who chant in one breath, death to Israel, death to America, or death to the Jews, death to America. We presume that somehow to be globalism, getting involved in that way. And so we say, no, we shouldn't get involved. Our hands are off of this because it doesn't impact us or it doesn't affect us. We are so quick to fight social justice warrior injustice and microaggressions and horrible offensive things said on the internet and in public, rightfully so, because if you think about the last 5 to 10 years, our entire existence as Western civilization and Western society has been completely surrounded by false accusations of injustice, by false accusations of microaggressions or of discrimination or racism in society, that we are failing to identify and fight actual injustice as it is rolling out before our very eyes. That is very plain to see and very obvious before ourselves because of the muscle memory of being quick to defend against false injustice, to the point we can't even recognize it anymore. The fact that we had rallies around the world, in London, in New York, in Sydney, Australia, where massive crowds of hundreds to thousands of people are waving swastika flags. They did over an Interpass here in the United States in the last few days as well, where we are showing swastika symbols on our phones and people are actually chanting, "Gas the Jews, kill the Jews, F the Jews." And we are so quick, many conservative, even Christian people, and just liberal people as well, people in general from the Western world, are so quick to say, that's not real, it's propaganda, that never really happened. I think is a muscle memory defensive reaction to us rightfully needing over the last 5 to 10 years to say false injustice is not real, but now we can't recognize actual injustice. The same thing goes for calling something propaganda, right? I've seen, I don't know how many thousands of comments in the last few days of people saying that the videos and the pictures that we are seeing, I'm going to try really hard not to get emotional the same way that we did on Tuesday. I've seen so many comments and DMs and messages from people that the actual video footage that we are being sent from Hamas, from a terrorist organization, of lighting children and families on fire, or civilians trying to escape in their car on fire, of beheading someone who wasn't even deceased yet with farming equipment while he was alive, of killing a woman's husband in front of her and violently raping her in front of her, of abducting entire families and making fun of them or torturing them on Facebook Live. Again, this isn't propaganda put out by any government. This is Hamas uploading these videos that they took themselves to Telegram channels and to the internet to try to brag about the success that they were able to achieve supposedly for Palestine. And I'm very glad to try to break that down today as a misconception. People are so quick to call this propaganda, maybe rightfully so from our past experience, not because it is propaganda, but because we saw a whole lot of propaganda with the inception of violence in Ukraine when old footage was being recycled. Maybe because we are so quick to say maybe that could be artificial intelligence, or maybe this could be fake news. We're so quick to say nothing is real, nothing is real, nothing is real. And I want to reiterate, this is why the damage is so very real of using terms like Nazi over and over and over again, like we've seen how many infinite millions of times in the last 5 to 10 years when it is not applicable to the situation. When we call people a Nazi for wanting to keep their business open during COVID, when we call people a Nazi for standing for freedom of expression and freedom of speech on college campuses, when we call people a Nazi for saying that a man is a man and a woman is a woman and we shouldn't be chopping the genitals off of 12-year-olds who don't need to go through menopause before they go through puberty, all of a sudden we've devalued what the term Nazi actually means. To the point that when literal Nazism is resurrected before our very eyes, maybe it looks a little bit different than it did in 1930s and 1940s Germany, but we are seeing people fly Nazi swastika flags over American interpasses on the freeway. We see groups of hundreds to thousands of people chanting "Gas the Jews" and "Kill the Jews" in major Western values free cities like Sydney, like London, like Paris, that is being wrought with insane protests today. We can't recognize legitimate Nazism when it's right in front of us. The same thing could be said for racism. The same thing could be said for misogynism. The same thing could be said for classism. When we keep doing this over and over and over again, it devalues what the term actually is to the point that we cannot recognize it when it actually does exist. When true injustice, which has always been around through all of human history and necessitates good people standing up and doing something about, when true injustice comes to fight, we can't recognize it and we lean into it as a society, or we immediately assume it's fake, that it's propaganda, that it's not really real, that it's fake injustice. It's just an SJW crying woke liberal thing to be upset about, and we don't have no interest in fighting against that. It's exactly why what we talked about yesterday with the rise of artificial intelligence and the rise of fake news in the last several years has been so dangerous. When we can create deep fake videos of a president of the United States giving a speech and we cannot distinguish or differentiate what is a real video and what is not, when it comes to some of these policy speeches and agendas, when we have criminals using phone calls that are not actually real and voice recordings that are not actually real of kids getting abducted from their parents and saying, you owe us $100,000 or else, and their child's actually fine, they're not actually being abducted. When stuff like that does happen, when actual abductions take place, when actual massacres take place, when actual sexual assault and sexual abuse takes place, we don't know how to recognize it. And this is why the damning evidence before us of why AI, artificial intelligence, why fake news, why all of these crazy inflammatory hyperbolic terms that we use from a political lens, like Nazi, like racist, like white supremacist, like transphobic or homophobic or whatever, why overusing these terms in the wrong setting is so wildly inappropriate and very, very scary. And I feel like there have been many people rightfully warning against this for so very long, but I am certainly concerned as an outspoken Christian, as an outspoken Catholic, as an outspoken conservative, as an American citizen, with the rise of so many people that I call friends, people that I love working with, people that still to this day I consider to be some of the most wonderful people in my life, that are so quick to jump on this bandwagon of this is fake, this is propaganda, this isn't happening in America or to American citizens. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. There have been more than 25 American citizens that have been killed in this massacre so far, and many of whom are still being held hostage. So we don't have a vested interest, but obviously we do have a vested interest in this situation. It's really concerning to see just humanity at large's inability to filter between what is real and what is not. A great example of this is the story about the 40 babies that were violently beheaded and set on fire in front of their parents in many of these neighborhoods in southern Israel after it was infiltrated. That region was infiltrated by Hamas terrorists. How quickly did you see, almost instantaneously, thousands of comments on social media from people saying, this was propaganda, this never happened, where are the images, where is this proof, this was just something some IDF soldier made up to try to generate sympathy through the mainstream media all over the world. And now, today, literally about 10 minutes ago, all of the images are actually coming out. And I would highly suggest if you have the opportunity to see them, I believe that we should be looking at this. I don't think that we should be looking away, but parents, especially if your children have unfiltered access to the internet, you should probably be very wary of the things that they are trying to see and accessing to see on the internet this week, because it truly is enough to make anyone's stomach turn. So these pictures are coming out now, right? But we can't even recognize it now that it's real because we've let this story consume us like wildfire, that it's all propaganda, it's all fake, it's not real. I also just want to say, and I said this on our locals post-stream Q&A yesterday, before we jump into some updated statistics and facts in our interview today, I realize the irony of me saying this and how silly it is because of how often we talk about true, probably conspiracy theories here on the stream. I feel like I am the queen of tinfoil hat, always question everything and certainly never trust the government situation. And that always applies. You should always verify. You should always try to seek the truth yourself. You should never just blindly follow any particular narrative. But not every single thing that you see is propaganda. Not every single thing that you see is inherently in and of itself a conspiracy. Sometimes true injustice does exist. It does, which makes fake injustice so pathetic in our current world today, because while we have the opportunity to fight true injustice, we're being pulled over to the side to fight stupid, pointless cultural battles that really make no difference in the grand scheme of things, how we all live our life, because certain social justice warrior activists want our focus to be over here when true injustice demands our attention and demands our efforts to actually fight it. Sometimes there is true threat from state actors, from non-state actors, period, full stop. And we always like to say, that would never happen here. That's just the media trying to scare us, or they're just trying to fearmonger. Sometimes there are reasons to be legitimately afraid. And I think we have forgotten that in the last few years when our media has been telling us, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, when we shouldn't have been. But sometimes there are very real threats to humanity that we need to fight before it becomes too impossible to fight. Sometimes the horrifying images and videos that come about of tragedies like this are not government propaganda that have been recycled from wars past or from conflicts past and tragedies past. Sometimes these things are real. And it's very, very concerning and sad to me to see how many people are so quick to say everything is fake, everything is a conspiracy. And I don't necessarily blame them for that, because that's where we have intentionally been leading people as a society and certainly as a country in the United States over the last 5 to 10 years, that we have lost the ability to filter between fact and fiction. We have lost the ability to filter between propaganda and legitimate footage. We have lost the ability to filter between a stupid social justice warrior meltdown and actual injustice in society, which has always and will continue to exist. The question is, are you as a human being willing to make yourself uncomfortable? To be willing to challenge your own perceptions and challenge your own perspective on things enough to go seek the truth? And I hope the answer is yes. Regardless of what side of the political aisle you might fall on, none of this has anything really to do with who you're going to vote for president. It should in the future, but like as of right this very second, supporting humanity and innocent civilians whose lives have been lost should be a universal human thing. This should not be a Republican thing. This should not be a Democrat thing. This should not be a conservative thing. This should not be a liberal thing. And yet we're almost unintentionally trying to make it such. Saying that thousands of innocent people and innocent families and children should not have been brutally massacred by terrorists should not be a Jewish thing, it should not be a Muslim thing, and it should not be a Christian thing, or it should not be an atheist thing. This should be a human thing. We have the opportunity, I said it 10 minutes ago and I'll say it again, we have the opportunity and the obligation this week to remind people that even with all of our differences, we are all human beings. And the lack of any opportunity for unity on any issue, but particularly on the loss of innocent human life. Full stop. Israeli, Palestinian, I don't care. Innocent human life at the hands of barbaric, demonic terrorists who have no value and no respect for human life. That should be the easiest thing in the world for us to unite on. And yet we can't. Or we won't. Don't be a part of the problem. Be a part of the solution. Say something. Stand up. Invite people to dialogue. Talk about things that are uncomfortable. Watch differing opinions. Expose yourself to a different perspective. It's the only way you will truly be able to seek objective truth and responsibly share it with the rest of the world. That's the journey I've been on this week, and that's not a week journey. That's a lifetime journey. I said on Tuesday that I am certainly never going to pretend that I am some international conflict and especially Middle Eastern conflict expert. I do not have my PhD in the history of Middle Eastern conflict. I do not live in the Middle East. I have been fortunate to visit, but I do not live there. What I'm trying to do through this stream is try to present information that perhaps, and this is true of any subject, but on this subject in particular, that perhaps you haven't heard from the mainstream media, or perhaps goes against a lot of the information and misinformation you are engaging with on social media every day. So all of that to be said, I want to cover a few very, very key talking points with you before we welcome in an actual international human rights expert and a Middle Eastern conflict expert, Bassem Eid, who I'm very excited to hand the microphone to here in just a moment. But just to paint the very clearest picture for you possible, in case this needs to be reiterated for the umpteenth time this week. Number one, Hamas, in the words of Bassem Eid, who will be our guest here in just a moment, Hamas is a brutal, barbaric, terrorist organization. Period. Full stop. They have no regard or respect for any human life. Israeli, Palestinian, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, American, European, anything with a beating heart, they will gladly sacrifice for the purpose of creating chaos. And not just sacrifice, by the way, but brutally, in the most barbarian, demonic means possible, torture you as well to create an opportunity to spin a narrative. This is what terrorists do. For whatever reason, we have forgotten this week, it seems, on social media and in the mainstream media, who refuse to even identify Hamas as an internationally renowned terrorist organization. But we know this. We know this about the Taliban. We knew this about Al-Qaeda. We know this about ISIS. We know this about Hezbollah. We know this about Hamas. This is not new information, but apparently it needs to continue to be reiterated. Hamas is a brutal, barbaric terrorist organization that has zero respect for any human life, Israeli, Palestinian, or anything in between, and who gladly will try to destroy and disintegrate human souls for the purpose of creating chaos. Hamas, as an internationally renowned terrorist organization, has a very long history of posing as a government agency for Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, which, just as a reminder from Tuesday, in case you forgot, has no shared border with the West Bank that is under the control of the Palestinian Authority. No shared border, no shared governance, only controls Gaza. which is very different from the West Bank. Hamas has a very long history, well before this week, which has been in the news, of misappropriating funds from the rest of the world and resources from the rest of the world to fund terrorism. You've probably heard a lot on social media and in the mainstream media this week about how evil Israel is and how war crimes are being committed this week because Israel turned off the electricity or Israel stopped supplying water. The truth is the entire international community has been supplying electricity, water, food, farming equipment, seeds, and just pallets of money, as well as bricks of concrete for building things, other infrastructure, resources, and needs to Gaza for the purpose of humanitarian aid for the 2 million people who live there and for civilians who truly are being held hostage. And I want you to remove the idea of offense for a second. Held hostage in every metaphorical and literal way possible by the Hamas government that was elected in Gaza 17 years ago. And there's never been an election since. There are no elections in Gaza. So this is a brutal terrorist dictatorship that has a very long history of misappropriating funds and resources to try to incite chaos and for specifically the purpose of terrorism against Israel. For nothing else. They don't care how many of their civilians starve. They don't care how many of their civilians don't have access to clean water or running water. They don't care that there's a sewage problem in every single street in the Gaza Strip or that sewage washes up on the beach in Gaza. They don't care if you don't have electricity and hospitals can't be powered to help people who have been struck by missiles. They don't care because they use literally all of the humanitarian aid that is provided from around the world solely for the purpose of terrorism. And that is not new from this week or this month or this year. There is a very long history of this happening. This is intel from the IDF in August of 2016, that aerial photography and footage of Gaza showed that massive amounts of funds from World Vision, which is a Christian aid organization. If you're not already familiar with them, especially if you're watching from abroad, you might not necessarily know what World Vision is. But massive amounts of money from World Vision were used by Hamas to build a military base that operates in Gaza, and specifically for that purpose. There was a June 2016 arrest of a senior World Vision worker who was charged with funneling $43 million in charity funds. $43 million that had been sent around from around the world to Gaza, which is under the governance of Hamas. So that's who gets the money to begin with, and whether it's ever disseminated to humanitarian aid, the world may never know. That was sent by people like you and me, ordinary people trying to help ordinary people through the most corrupt system possible, and it ended up being used to build a military base in the Gaza Strip. The Jerusalem Post reported in 2021, 2 years ago, that misuse of Gaza aid because of Hamas is likely to continue. This was an opinion piece that put together an entire litany of examples of misappropriation of funds and humanitarian aid from Hamas as a government organization that has no interest in supplying humanitarian aid to any of their civilians, period, full stop. And interestingly, they said in June of 2021, Axios, which is I actually think is a great news source. I've been really enjoying Axios lately, reported that a Hamas leader in June of 2021, more than 2 years ago, rejected a proposal from the United Nations to finance reconstruction of Gaza, infrastructure, new housing, safe roads, safe electric poles, and everything in between, because they wanted to use a new monitoring mechanism to prevent terrorist activity. In other words, they wanted some level of oversight to make sure that a terrorist government was actually going to use the money for humanitarian aid, and then we would basically give you like a blank check from the UN to rebuild Gaza for the purposes of your 2 million citizens and civilians who are living in abject horror. And they said, yeah, that's nice, but no thanks. We're going to reject your proposal, because they wanted to be able to use the cash as they saw fit. NPR in 2021, so Western media, starts reporting that Gaza wants to rebuild, and this was through this same conversation with the UN of funding, but ensuring the funds don't go to Hamas, the government of Gaza, and I use that term very loosely with extreme quotation marks, the terrorist organization posing as a government in the Gaza Strip is slowing the process because the international community had no idea how to deal with this. There was no way to know where the money was actually going. The AL Monitor, which is an independent news source in the Middle East, reported this in 2017, March of 2017. How does humanitarian funds end up in Hamas's pockets? Israeli authorities are accusing Hamas of stealing funds from humanitarian organizations working in the Gaza Strip. But any action to stop the embezzlement could harm the Gaza population the aid is intended for. Guess what? The aid isn't getting there anyway. The aid never got there anyway. Whether the intention is good or not, the practicality is if you give blank checks to terrorist organizations, they are not going to use those funds or the bricks to build buildings or the water pipes for clean water or the food or just the water itself. They're not going to give that to an ordinary civilian. There's no benefit there. Wherever they can use those opportunities to create terror, to create chaos, to incite violence, that is the path that is going to be taken. Even the United States government has a history of reporting on this. In 2019, the U.S. Department of the Treasury put out a press release about how we found facilitators moving millions of dollars from humanitarian aid to Hamas in Gaza. There were all these middlemen to make sure that this was less traceable. We ended up tracing it anyway through the U.S. Department of the Treasury. But in August of 2019, we reported on this. This is not new information. And just as a reminder, because I think this needs to be said for the zillionth time, Hamas was originally designated by the American U.S. Department of State as a foreign terrorist organization in October of 1997. October of 1997. I was like 4 or 5 months old. I was born in May of 1997. The United States government, the European Union, most European nations, most Western nations, pretty much everyone except for the United Nations has recognized Hamas as an internationally recognized terrorist organization for about the time that I have been alive. And now, this week, our media wants to call them Hamas militants or Hamas actors or the group of Hamas rather than terrorists. In fact, the Canadian Broadcasting Organization, public broadcasting in Canada, for those of you who might be watching from the Great White North, is specifically directing Canadian journalists to not use the word terrorist when referencing Hamas. Why this week? Even though we have a very long history. The oldest article I showed you, and these are like just 5 articles in a realm of endless information. The oldest article going back to 2016 here. Newsflash, that was a long time ago. That was a really long time ago. Not new information, and yet we're treating it like new propaganda, let alone information, as of this week in Western media. Why is that? Why is that? There is no answer for that, other than they want you to believe that up is down and down is up and left is right and right is left. Interestingly, Hamas themselves owns up to this and brags about this. Maybe not necessarily the misappropriation of funds, although there was a guilty verdict in one of these cases in Israel about mass misappropriation of funds from World Vision, that Christian resource organization. But just this week, they put out a video. I believe it was put out this week. I actually don't know when it was put out, so don't quote me on that. But they themselves released a hype style video, a bragging style video, taking the water pipes that the nation of Israel provided to Gaza through their governance of Hamas, at least within the last several years, because that's when they've been governing. I believe this video came from this week. Don't quote me on that, but I'm 99% sure. Using the water pipes for the purpose of bringing clean water to civilians living in Gaza for the specific purpose of making rockets. Not only are they not interested in helping their civilians have access to clean water, they're going to use the humanitarian aid provided to Palestinians from Israel to create a rocket to kill Jews, Muslims, and Christians in Israel. Watch this. Yeah. Hamas put that video out. Just like they put the videos out of burning people alive, of decapitating people, of raping young women, of parading their desecrated bodies all over the Gaza Strip that they literally broke in half. This is not propaganda. These people, these terrorists, put these videos out to brag to the world about what they are doing. They have absolutely no shame. None. Zero. In fact, they have pride in refusing to provide humanitarian aid and assistance to the civilians that they are quite literally, in every definition possible, holding hostage. And I don't say that lightly. I say that quite literally. Holding hostage for the purposes of PR, holding hostage for the purposes of photo ops with their deceased bodies after a retaliatory missile strike comes down on a Hamas military base in Gaza. Holding hostage metaphorically, literally, in every definition of the word possible. But it's not just rejecting humanitarian aid. There is a very long history of these poorly built rockets, probably because they are building them from water pipes that are supplied by Israel, misfiring, not making it across the border, or even purposefully landing in Gaza and killing Palestinian civilians in Gaza, that then they turn around to market as Israel killed our people, Israel killed our citizens. In 2023, May of 2023, so just a few months ago, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies reported that there were misfired Islamic Jihad rockets killing Palestinian children. On May 10th, rockets launched at Israel by Iran-backed Islamic Jihad on May 10th killed 4 Palestinian children, 3 of them children. 4 Palestinian civilians, 3 of them children, after falling short within the Gaza Strip. We could report on this in May, that they were killing their own people because of these rockets, but we're not reporting on it now. Good luck doing a Google search of this week. In 2021, the Human Rights Watch organization, internationally dedicated human rights organization in the world, legal scholars quote Human Rights Watch literally all of the time. Leftist politicians quote Human Rights Watch literally all of the time. Human Rights Watch reported on August 12th of 2021, Palestinian rockets in May of 2021 killed civilians in Israel and Gaza. And in fact, Human Rights Watch had the wherewithal to correctly label indiscriminate attacks by Gaza-based rockets. The rockets in Gaza being fired indiscriminately into Israel as war crimes. Because they are killing civilians indiscriminately, everywhere. No regard for human life. Associated Press, a traditionally pretty anti-Israel, anti-Jewish publication, was able to report, based on that Human Rights Watch report, that a human rights group says Hamas rockets at Israel are a war crime. Good luck trying to find that information in our media this week. Good luck. You won't find any of it. Believe me, I tried. I did the deep dive. I did the deep digging for you. But we could say this in 2021 because in an 11-day conflict in 2021, if you guys don't remember, rockets that were fired from Gaza to Israel landed in Gaza because they didn't make it that far. Again, probably because they're making these rockets out of water pipes and whatever humanitarian aid was provided from the rest of the world, and killed 7 Palestinians. I don't know how clearly this can be said other than repeating the same line 100% of the time. Terrorists have zero regard, zero respect, zero reverence for human life. And I say human as the most blanket term possible. Israeli, Palestinian, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, American, European, anything with a soul and a heartbeat. And animals too, by the way, because they open fired on a bunch of dogs in the in the towns in southern Israel that they infiltrated. I watched the videos of those. So, in case that's not incredibly obvious to you, they want their own civilians to die. And they do not care when Palestinians are killed in the process. It's actually probably a great PR opportunity to say that they are being victimized by the Israeli government, where it is legal and culturally accepted to be Jewish, Muslim, Arab, Christian, atheist, an immigrant from another country, etc. In fact, they say that this is about religion, right? They say this is a jihad. This is an Islamic jihad. But the rockets that they are firing indiscriminately from Gaza under Hamas into Israel, particularly those that make it quite far, that make it towards Jerusalem, are fired so indiscriminately that we don't know when they land on Jewish houses or Muslim houses or Christian houses. It could land on a synagogue, or it could land on a cathedral, or it could land on a mosque. And Bassem Eid, who will be our guest here in just a few minutes, actually reported on this 3 days ago on his Instagram, that a Hamas rocket fired from Gaza into Israel hit a mosque and destroyed a mosque. He said Hamas continues to fire rockets indiscriminately at civilian areas. They don't care who they kill. Hashtag free Gaza from Hamas. It's fascinating information to try to wrap your head around. Like, truly is so unbelievably difficult to try to understand, especially when there is very little to no information accurately being reported this week. So you have to look for outside of this week. You have to look for where this was reported on in the past. And a great example of where things have been reported on in the past is why civilians are dying in Gaza when Israel is firing missiles into Gaza to try to take out terrorists, to try to take out Hamas. Why are civilians dying in that process? It's not because Israel's trying to kill civilians. In fact, they use every app, every phone, every screen, every flyer opportunity distributed, every single opportunity possible to tell civilians, this square block of Gaza is going to be destroyed. Please leave. We do not want you to die. We don't want you to die. Please don't die. And in every situation, Hamas will then follow up with that messaging saying that it is Israeli propaganda and you need to just stay put to show them that you were right and they were wrong. And then they gladly use the death of those innocent people as a PR opportunity to further terrorism and to further chaos. This is why there is a well-recorded record throughout Hamas's history of them stockpiling weapons and stockpiling rockets in schools, in civilian homes, where children play, at children's playgrounds. They put their military bases underneath of hospitals. They do this on purpose so that when they need to be destroyed in defense of the atrocities of terrorism that they are committing against the Israeli people, and sometimes even of their own people, they very purposefully put civilians in the line of fire to make it seem like someone else is the aggressor. And this is a very powerful narrative that is very difficult to dispel, right? Our entire media is set up to help you believe the opposite. Every major celebrity and political voice, although many are speaking up for truth this week, which is positive, are set up to make you believe the opposite. The thousands of people that will come and flood your comments section and say you don't care about Palestinians because this is crazy if you want to say that Hamas is evil, right? Hamas isn't evil. They're the government of Gaza. You can't say that. These people are set up to make you believe the opposite. And the truth is, if you care about civilian life, if you care about the sanctity of human life, if you care about an end to violence, if you care about a new dawn of peace, if you care about children being used as pawns in a war that they never asked to be a part of, if you care about Israelis or Palestinians, if you care about Israelis and Palestinians, if you care about Jews, Muslims, Christians, atheists, Americans, Europeans, I keep saying this litany, but literally any human being with a soul and a heartbeat, you should be vocally using any platform that you have this week to call for an end to terrorists, to Hamas, to set innocent Palestinian citizens free from being held hostage by terrorists, literally and metaphorically. This is what they do. And sadly, it is extremely biblical that truth is not going to be obvious to people, right? That up is down and down is up. That right is wrong and wrong is right. I mean, for God's sakes, the Ontario Mathematics Association in Canada. Sorry to be throwing Canada under the bus so much today, but it is Canada. Sorry, Canadians, for watching this. Canada, you can't say 2 + 2 = 4 anymore. That's a dog whistle of white supremacy. So if we can let ourselves believe that, it's easy to understand how we can let ourselves believe that right is wrong and wrong is right in this particular conflict. That terrorists are the good guys. And it's hard to wrap our heads around, but it is very true. There are a few updates that I want to share with you as we welcome Bassem Eid into the stream and get a very interesting Palestinian take on the human rights conflict with Hamas in Gaza. The first being, I'm reading headlines today and late last night that the U.S. has been working with the governments of Israel and Egypt last night and today for creating safe passage for Palestinian civilians out of Gaza, including American citizens that have been held hostage there. John Kirby from our government says civilians are not to blame for what Hamas has done. I fundamentally do agree with that. Obviously, it's an extremely complicated situation. There are borders to Gaza with Israel and with Egypt. Israel can't necessarily open up a border checkpoint between Gaza and Israel for indiscriminate amounts of citizens to just flood into Israel, because terrorists will absolutely take advantage of that opportunity to continue furthering this conflict. So the way that this is looking is probably that the Rafah border from southern Gaza into Egypt probably might be opened, depending on Egypt's cooperation with the situation, to allow innocent civilians to leave Gaza in the midst of this ongoing conflict and creating a humanitarian corridor. I think that's a really positive development, and I'm glad to see Israel, Egypt, and the United States start working towards this. But as we are seeing people start to create opportunities for dialogue and peace, we are also seeing terrorists create opportunities for continued violence and continued division around the world. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Khalid Masal, who is one of the founding members of Hamas. He hasn't been a leader of Hamas, I believe, for like 11 years, but he is a founding member and holds profound influence over the organization still. Amazingly, despite appearing in front of a green screen that looks like Jerusalem, you can see the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the background. He lives in very, very high-end luxury in Qatar and is very safe from anything happening to him, but I digress. There was a video that went pretty viral, and it's been confirmed to be true, that he called for an international day of rage for this Friday, as in tomorrow, Friday the 13th, around the world. He specifically is asking for financial help from all Muslims around the world, calling this financial jihad, to give money to Hamas to continue furthering terrorist activity. And he asked all Muslims around the world to carry jihad in their souls, to fight and be martyrs for Al-Aqsa. He specifically called for Muslims to fight against Jews, and in particular to fight against Americans and Westerners as well. He said, funds are important, but today we ask for your blood and souls to be sacrificed for Palestine. As this call for an international day of jihad is heating up, we are starting to see some violence break out here in the United States already. I don't know if this is related to an international call for jihad at all. This could be a totally unconnected, unrelated situation, but the timing is quite coincidental that at the Atlanta International Airport, late last night, in the middle of the night, a woman was arrested after she stabbed 3 people at the Atlanta airport, including a police officer right before the area for security. She also stabbed her Uber or her taxi driver on the way to the airport there in Atlanta. Today at Columbia University in New York City, a 19-year-old female student assaulted a 24-year-old student who is studying Israeli general studies with a stick in front of the library. Oh, actually, I apologize. That was late last night. And there's a lot of coverage of this happening now in New York City at Columbia University, and this call for violence and disruption and kind of like the purge all across the world for for tomorrow, for Friday, is very much concerning some people. And I think there are rightful reasons to be concerned about that. So wherever you can continue to stay safe, and more importantly, wherever you can continue to speak the truth and find humanity in one another, as the powers that be and the evil powers that be, aka terrorists, are trying to continue dividing us, it's never, ever, ever been important to the level and to the degree that it is now. As we get ready to welcome Bassem Eid into the stream here, I want to be abundantly clear. If you care about humanity, I've said it 20 times during the stream, but I'm just going to keep saying it over and over again until people get the picture. If you care about humanity, both Israeli and Palestinian civilians, regardless of where you stand politically on this issue or any other issue, you should be very vocal today with any platform that you have about the destruction of this barbaric, demonic terrorist organization, Hamas, with quite literally zero record on human rights, with zero regard for human life. And that includes everybody who has been commenting on every one of my posts and sending me very interesting DMs over the last 48 to 72 hours. Maybe who are even in the chat of this stream, who are saying free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. If you cannot put the dots together in your mind that if you are an innocent Israeli or an innocent Palestinian, the only solution forward is to create an end to terrorism, I hope and pray this interview that we are about to watch challenges your perspective and opens your eyes and opens your heart to a new way forward that puts humanity first. Period. Full stop. I'm incredibly excited to welcome in a new friend to the stream. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, we pre-recorded this at like 5 a.m. East Coast time because he lives in East Jerusalem. He lives in Israel, and obviously things are really crazy over in the area right now. But we are very, very fortunate to be joined by Bassem Eid here on the stream today. He is a Palestinian. He lives in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, and he is a very, very well-renowned international human rights expert, political analyst, and journalist, and often comments on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for Middle Eastern TV and radio and for international media as well. His initial focus as a human rights activist was actually for human rights violations from his perception that were committed by Israeli armed forces against Palestinians, but he had this huge paradigm shift in his journey to broaden his research and his expertise to include human rights violations against Palestinians that were committed by the Palestinian Authority, the governance group over the West Bank, and in particular Hamas. In 1996, he founded the Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group that ceased operations in 2011, but he works with very well-renowned human rights organizations all over the world. He travels the world every year to speak to universities, to political experts, to legal experts, and more about where the Western world is getting the story of Palestinian oppression and Palestinian human rights violations wrong. The moment I interviewed him to see if he would be willing to be a guest on our stream today, he instantaneously emailed us back and was very enthusiastic to share the truth about what's happening for Palestinians in the region this week and why Hamas is easily the greatest perpetrator of human rights aggressions against Palestinians. As I'm sure you can imagine, the electricity and the Wi-Fi in all of Israel and all of the area and the region right now is very, very spotty. So he has beautiful, very eloquent answers, but sometimes he might flicker in and out. His image might flicker in and out, and there might be a little bit of a delay in his audio, but we tried to fix as much of that as we possibly could. I highly encourage you to stick around through the end of this interview because it is truly one of the most powerful conversations I've ever had. And as you go into this, I want you to pay very close attention and open your ear and very specifically listen to the emotion that you are going to hear in Bassem's voice here. The amount of misunderstanding and all-out lies that America and the Western world is perpetrating about Hamas and about the Free Palestine movement necessitating the existence of a terrorist organization is chilling. And it's enough to make you totally rethink everything you think you might know about what this conflict is. So without further ado, I'm incredibly excited to welcome in my new friend and someone who very generously gave us his time and expertise today to discuss this from a Palestinian perspective, Bassem Eid. Bassem Eid, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. We are so grateful for you taking a few minutes from your home in Jerusalem to explain more of the intricacies of what's going on the other side of the globe from us in the United States this week. You are an internationally recognized human rights expert and activist, originally growing up in a refugee camp in Palestine. Can you give us a picture of how you came into the work that you are doing today?
See, I am a person who spent almost 28 years from my life defending the rights of the Palestinians, firstly under the Israelis and secondly under the Palestinian Authority. And I, as a person who grown up for 33 years in a refugee camp, I start realizing that the world is not as they taught us in the schools and during the textbooks that they distribute to us. They used to say that Israel has no right to exist, but Israel is existing and very strongly in the Middle East. The reputation of Israel today is not like 20 years ago. Look how much connection Israel has with the Arab countries, with the Muslim countries. And I think that Israel is a fact on the ground. No one has the right to ignore the existing of the state of Israel right now.
Several years ago in your career, you made a very big shift, as you just mentioned, going from defending Palestinian human rights from the Israeli government and from that perspective to opening the world's eyes to what it truly is like to be a Palestinian living under corrupt rule, largely from Hamas. Why did that shift happen for you? And what do you think America and the Western world are really misunderstanding about what it's like to be a Palestinian today?
I think that the word misunderstanding, that the Hamas is a brutal, a barbaric organization. We talk here about terrorism, not human being at all. I think what the Hamas did in the southern of Israel should be considered as a genocide. And all of the international community must have to stand up with Israel against the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. You know what's hurting me more? That there are thugs and gangsters around the world celebrating the genocide in southern of Israel, considering it as a Palestinian victory. If genocide became a victory in the 21st century, this is the end of humanity. I think that the world should have to stand up and to fight beside Israel against those terrorists in the Gaza Strip. Hamas keeping 2 million civilians in Gaza as hostages. Hamas defending its rockets by using its own people. Hamas hiding weapons inside the hospitals and the mosques. I think that the international community must have to wake up now and to try to do something in terms to erase these terrorists from the map.
I think that word that you just used is very powerful, hostages. You've said that in previous interviews and a video that you did for PragerU here in the United States. Americans, for whatever reason, don't seem to understand how that's operating in Gaza. Can you explain that a bit more for us today?
I think that the situation in Gaza is horrible. People are so scared and couldn't speak up against what is going on. Now, Israel impose, and unfortunately, we didn't see here any effort from the international community to calm down the situation. Mm-hmm. The Secretary of the State, Mr. Blinken, arrived to Israel this morning, and I hope that he will be able to change the picture right now. I think that the Americans should have to be much more tough against the Hamas and against the Islamic Jihad, and to declare on them right now as they are a part of the ISIS and should be considered as terrorists.
Are you concerned when you see posts on the internet or the media covering Hamas as a legitimate governance organization?
I think that those people or that media almost, let's say, forgotten the ethics of journalism. Mm. I saw on the social media horrible things, and I think that the Facebook and the X should be blamed on these incitements and hatreds that people are boasting on the social media. Unfortunately, the social media these days bringing more and more violence to the region, and it should have to be ended as soon as possible.
There is a term I'm seeing quite frequently thrown around in the United States this week, and I've heard it before, that Israel is an apartheid state, largely because of Gaza. That's a misconception you have been working very hard to dispel. Why is it wrong?
See, I think that those people who consider Israel as an apartheid, they are just hates Israel and hates the Jews. These people never been in Israel. They don't know exactly the situation in Israel. They don't know that there are so many Arabs in the highest departments in Israel. We have an Israeli Arab who is a judge as the Israeli Supreme Court. Look to the hospitals, nurses, doctors running the biggest departments in the hospitals. I think that the word apartheid is just a kind of a political slogan that the haters of Israel trying to use it.
Can you tell us a bit more, being closer to the location, what day-to-day life for a civilian, an innocent person, might look like living under Hamas in Gaza?
See, sometimes I am talking with people in Gaza, and I am asking them, what exactly you want from Israel? They said, we want a very simple thing. We want Israel to open one of its passages for 2 hours and then 30% of the Gazan youths will immigrate to another country. People in Gaza waiting for the opportunity to escape. People couldn't speak. Hamas killing and slaughtering them, torturing them in the prisons. No record of human rights under the Hamas. If Iran recognizing the human rights, or Sudan or Syria, then we can talk about the human rights under the Hamas. I really wish to liberate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Hamas regime.
When you see, as a human rights expert yourself, organizations like the United Nations almost give preferential treatment to Hamas as a governance organization rather than the Israeli government, how do you feel about that?
I'm feeling so sad. Unfortunately, the UN became a part of the conflict rather than a part of the solution. That's the major problem of the UN. The UN should have today to stand up and to declare on Hamas as a terrorist organization after what they did in the southern of Israel. To abduct an old woman, 85 years old, from her house and to take her to Gaza, that's a crime of war. I think that the UN should have also to mention that old lady that was taken from her house to the Gaza Strip.
What do you think Americans can do to more clearly understand what it's like for innocent Palestinians living under a terrorist regime?
Very simple things. How to free those 2 million Palestinians from these thousands of terrorists.
When it comes to where we move forward from here, everyone has a theory, but I think it's important for Americans to understand how deeply interconnected various terror organizations in the Middle East truly are. We're starting to see some activation of Hezbollah from Lebanon. Are you concerned that the Western world's response to Hamas might lead to an escalation of other terror attacks in the region?
I think that after the President Joe Biden declared about the Hamas as ISIS, this is the time to stand up and to deal with the Hamas as they are dealing with ISIS in other countries around the world. Hamas must have to be hit by the international community. No other ways to release.
How about the American media accusations that Israel is committing human rights atrocities in Gaza by turning off the electricity or water supply?
They also should have to watch what Hamas doing in the Gaza Strip and what the Islamic Jihad doing in the Gaza Strip. And what the Palestinians, this is also must have to be watched by those organizations.
The misappropriation of humanitarian aid is such a fascinating subject in Gaza because it's been happening for so long. In America, we send billions of dollars every year through our government and charitable organizations to try to help the humanitarian crisis that does exist in Gaza. For those that don't seem to understand, why is that money and those resources not getting to the people it was intended to help?
Yeah, I think that is such kind of aid must have to be stopped as soon as possible. Everyone around of the world knows that any aid to Gaza will never reach the people. People are suffering. How to free them from Hamas? That is what the international community should have to start dealing with.
Something I love about your social media, Bassem, is that you share very powerful stories of Israelis and Palestinians finding the humanity in one another, or of the Arab Israeli community that our media wants to conveniently ignore far too often. What do you wish people knew about the shared humanity that Arabs and Jews, or even Christians and other people who immigrate to Israel from around the world, truly have every day?
Fortunately, the international community is still keeping a blind eyes in what's going on. And the international community became a part of the conflict rather than a part of the solution. And I think that the foreign policies of the international community should have to be changed. They should have to look, if they are really pro-Palestinian, they shouldn't have to hate the Jews. And if they are pro-Israelis, they shouldn't have to hate Palestinians. To be pro-peace and to wish peace between the two sides.
You've said on your social media this week that to be pro-Palestinian is to actively want to fight against terror and fight against Hamas. Practically, how does the world begin to do that?
See, I am trying to do the best to show the realities on the ground to those who are not existing among us. I am trying and trying and trying. But unfortunately, I don't have a kind of a huge support from the international community. You know, I am lecturing in the United States probably 8 times a year, but I never been in France as an example. I never been in Belgium as an example. Why that? Why they try to boycott me? Why they try to ignore me? I am a Palestinian and I am still allowed to speak on behalf of the Palestinians. Not those who are living in Los Angeles or living in London, and those organizations who are trying to use the Palestinians, like the BDS as an example. And the big question to the BDS, whom authorized you to speak on behalf of the Palestinians?
Is there a broader... Go ahead.
Palestinians still exist by themselves.
Is there a broader message of solidarity that you are hearing from your Palestinian community in the area, that they are frustrated with how the Western world is portraying Palestine?
Yes, unfortunately, I think everyone is so frustrated from the attitude and the behavior of the international community. Look to the Palestinian Authority. It's so corrupt authority. The situation of the Palestinians under the Palestinian Authority is much worse than it used to be under the Israelis. And people just waiting to get a working permit inside Israel. This is what every Palestinian is waiting for.
I'm very overwhelmed with emotion this week, Bassem, and I think many Americans are as well, with just the sheer humanity of what's gone on this week on all fronts with the loss of innocent life. Can you reveal to us what the feeling tangibly is on the ground there in Jerusalem this week?
See, people are very scared. People are not going to their work inside Israel. They are scared that maybe some Jews will revenge from them. The streets and the roads are empty, like someone imposed a curfew.
When it comes to where we move forward from here in this crisis and how we try to pick up the pieces and regain somewhat of a normal life in Israel and in Gaza and around the world, how do you think that should look with the response from the international community?
See, I think that the international community should have to start working hardly towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to try to find out some solutions for this conflict. But in the meantime, the international community also should have to erase those terrorists from the map. While those terrorists are still exist, no possibility for any solution in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So let us pray that something will come out after this horrible massacre. And I want to see how the international community is going to deal with the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad afterwards.
If you could share, Bassem, one final message to Americans confused about how to find a step forward or confused about what's going on and where we should find our shared humanity again, what would you say?
I much more want to send a message for the so-called pro-Palestinians in America. Stop spreading violence and hatred. Stop considering genocide as a victory. Without stopping such violence and hatred, I think that we are moving toward a more complicated situation. Please be a human being. Humanity is much important than anything else. Palestinians and Jews are human beings. And the both sides has the full right to exist. If you can help, please go ahead. If you couldn't help, stop spreading lies, hatred, and violence.
If you could share with us where we can help in any way, even if it's as simple as our prayers, is there anything we can do this week to lend a hand?
I think that as civilians, nobody can help at this moment. We need forces, we need power, which can come through countries and leaders. Those leaders can contribute a lot to the current situation. And I want to wish the Secretary of the State, Blinken, to have a very successful trip to Israel.
Bassem Eid, thank you so much for taking some time with us. This was so powerful, and I hope it opens the eyes to so many people who might not be believing the truth today. We are praying for your safety, and we are so appreciative of the work that you continue to do to share the truth with the world. Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
I've said it, I don't know how many times in the last few days. Too many times in the last few days. Pray. We always look at prayer as a last line of defense, as a last resort, at least in the realm of American faith. And maybe that comes from us being very privileged to not be in the heart of conflict. Maybe that comes from us having had it so good for so long. But we look at prayer as a last resort because it's not something that we feel like we're doing with our hands. It's not something that we feel like we're tangibly contributing to a problem. And we almost like meme thoughts and prayers, right? When there's a mass shooting, we say thoughts and prayers, and everybody says that doesn't actually do anything. When there's a terrorist attack, we say thoughts and prayers. And then we say that doesn't actually do anything. Wrong. It does everything. Because the truth is, not only is this literal war being waged between armed forces and terrorists and militaries, between innocent civilians and barbaric, demonic, not even animalistic, because animals don't treat each other this way, but true terrorists. But it's also being waged between good and evil. It's being waged on a spiritual plane that we can't always see with our own two eyes, but is absolutely here in this world and influencing this world far more than we ever give it credit for. Prayer should be our first line of both attack and defense. And when I say pray, I don't just mean like a comment on Instagram that says, like if you're praying. I don't mean posting a picture of yourself visiting the Holy Land 15 years ago. That's nice, and I'm glad you're doing that. I don't mean going to one of these prayer vigils for the purpose of taking a selfie with a candle and saying, prayers for Israel on social media, or prayers for the Palestinians on social media. Like in the quiet of your bedroom where no one is watching you tonight. Right now, as soon as this stream is over. Wherever you are, hit your knees, close your eyes, and beg God for peace. Beg God for these terrorists to have a dramatic change of heart, a dramatic transformation of their souls. This would not be the first time that someone committing genocide against God's chosen people had a very powerful change of heart. We've seen that throughout history. We saw that with Saul becoming Paul, becoming arguably the greatest evangelist for Christianity in all of history. This wouldn't be the first time. Nothing is impossible with God. And if they can't do that, and even if they do have the opportunity to do that, pray that God has mercy on their souls. Because we are called to pray for our enemies. We are called to pray for people who persecute us. And we are promised that we are going to be persecuted against, that we are going to be hated, that our safety will be in jeopardy, and that we may even lose our lives in the process. And if this week is not tangible evidence for you that that is true, I don't know how much worse you need it to get before you realize. And make no mistake about it, it probably will get a lot worse. I think we're in for a journey, but I was very fortunate to talk to my friend Gracie for a while yesterday on the phone for like an hour. And we just tried to unpack this more from a spiritual plane and a spiritual lens rather than feeling anxious or feeling on edge about where this goes from here. And are we going to World War III? And why are these politicians saying this? And what do these comments on social media mean? If you truly believe in your faith, and if you truly believe in something bigger than this world, if you truly believe in God, ultimately, persecution is guaranteed. And persecution probably isn't going to look like mean Instagram comments or people threatening to unfollow you on Instagram. That might be what it looks like, and I certainly am one of the people experiencing a whole lot of that this week. But persecution really looks like what we're seeing this week in the Holy Land. I've been so inspired, like truly floored, at a loss for words at the number of completely full airplanes from all over the world of people with ties to Israel jumping on planes to go fight against terrorists to protect the lives of Jews, Muslims, Christians, everybody ethnically that lives in Israel, just people, the Western world, Western civilization against terrorists. They are voluntarily, joyfully singing the Israeli national anthem, singing prayers on these planes from all over the world, coming into the heart of conflict to go put themselves and their safety and their lives in harm's way for the service of others and for the service of their faith. Because there is no greater honor than doing that. You heard Meira say on Tuesday that she is stuck somewhere else. She was on vacation with her husband. They just recently got married and they were on vacation. And they're desperately trying to get home and all their flights are getting canceled. And we asked her, why is everybody going back to Israel? Like in America, I feel like we would all just get on a plane and we would leave. We would go somewhere else. We would go hide. And she said, because when your family has something happen to them, your first instinct is you need to be there. And I think we need to view this lens through the lens that this courageous, incredible Palestinian human rights activist shared with us today. You heard how he said, just be a human being. We are all human beings. Israeli, Palestinian, anyone else. We are human beings. And human beings have the right to exist. I believe that from the lens of the pro-life movement. I believe that through the lens of fighting against human trafficking. I believe that through the lens of quality of life and traditional Western Judeo-Christian values. And I certainly believe that today, when our humanity is under severe attack, culturally, in the media, in our education system, and literally under attack with this conflict and subsequent conflicts that I'm sure are going to spin out of this. We need to find the humanity in each other again, to see God in each other again. Because every human being is made in the image of God. Every human being is worthy of the same respect and dignity and protection and the opportunity to live as someone else. And unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect paradise. We don't live in heaven. We live in a very messed up, controlled by evil world where there are going to be actors of evil and agents of evil like terrorists that should be pretty easy for us to identify, but for whatever reason, we're having a hard time identifying. There is no greater honor than to seek truth, and we believe truth has a name as Christians, God. There is no greater honor than to share the truth, and there is no greater honor than to defend the things that you believe in to your core about your faith, no matter what comes your way. I don't know where this goes from here. I have no idea. I'll be totally honest. I have no idea. Could this turn into World War III? Maybe. At this point, kind of likely, in my opinion. My parents would disagree with me on that, but I think a lot of it depends on a few different state and non-state actors in the next few days. Could we see an international day of terror tomorrow? Yeah. I mean, there was already a stabbing at one U.S. airport, and maybe that was totally unrelated, but the timing is awfully coincidental. Could we see more and more religiously driven violence break out in the name of all of this? Yes, and we will, whether that's tomorrow, whether that's related to this conflict, or whether that's closer to the return of the Messiah. But we are promised persecution. And I think the question is, are we going to be so afraid of being accepted by this world that we just go along with the narrative even when deep, deep down we kind of know it's not true, but it's just all we're willing to go find, go seek, go experience? Or are we going to be willing to tell the truth even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable, even if it means we jeopardize our reputation or our Instagram followers or even our safety? It's a question that we all need to get comfortable asking ourselves. And while I was talking about this with Gracie, I didn't say any of that to her, and she didn't say any of that to me to freak each other out. It gave us this newfound sense of hope, in a way, that ultimately there's going to be insane, horrible, tragic things that are going to happen in the future in human history. But how we respond to it is everything. It's everything. It is so apparently obvious to me in the last few days how people sat back and let the Holocaust happen. And now when we are seeing a similar level of calls to violence, and the greatest number of Jews killed in a single day since the Holocaust, and other people saying we should just wipe out every Muslim on the face of the planet, and other people saying, I don't care if you're Jewish or Muslim or Christian, but if you support Western values at all, we should just wipe you off the face of the planet. That level of rhetoric deserves a response. It demands a response. And how we respond from a position of peace, from a position of faith, and from a position of truth is everything, even when it's hard. Even when people aren't doing it alongside of you. Even when you get made fun of or persecuted or hung out to dry. Are you willing to say something? Are you willing to ask the hard questions? Are you willing to seek the truth? The answer is up to you. And as this conflict continues to unfold, I think it's only going to get harder to do that. You have to be willing to do what other people aren't willing to do and ask the questions other people aren't willing to ask. To go beyond Twitter headlines, to go beyond viral TikToks, to go beyond Instagram comments. You got to go do some research. It's hard. It's really hard to do that, but it is worth it. And the journey of knowledge is power, is such a beautiful thing that we should accept as a beautiful result of freedom to be able to seek that knowledge that, at least right now, nobody can take away from us. I encourage all of you to keep praying, hit your knees, pray without ceasing, like truly, literally make your entire day about prayer. Not just today, and not just when things are bad, but when things are good too. Because your entire outlook on life will completely change. And the impact that you are able to make will also completely change. This is as much a spiritual front of war as it is a physical front. And us being willing to courageously find the God-given humanity in each other has never been more important than it is right now. That's it for the stream today, you guys. As I'm sure you can imagine, I'm in desperate need of a good nap. I've been going since like 5 a.m. Thank you again to the incredible Bassem Eid for joining us on the stream today. If you guys haven't already heard of him or seen his international human rights work, I highly recommend going to follow him on Instagram. His handle was in front of his screen on the split screen there throughout the entirety of the interview. But go follow him on social media. Go look up his papers and his writings. He just had a wonderful op-ed in Newsweek a couple of days ago. Extremely well respected from all over the world and provides, I believe, a very unique perspective that the world really, really needs to hear, particularly Western media and the Western world. So please consider giving him a follow and thanking him in the comments on his Instagram for joining us on the stream today. Share this stream with someone that you think could benefit from a challenge of their perspective and maybe a different way of thinking. And before you go, please do me a huge favor and like this stream so that others can hear what Bassem had to say. That looks like a little thumbs up or a little heart, depending on where you're watching. Make sure that you ring that notification bell so that you always know when we are going live and when we upload a new video. And most importantly, smash that follow or subscribe button wherever you guys are watching so that we can keep having these important conversations when the world needs it most. No post-stream Q&A today because I'm going to go take a nap and spend some time with my dog. But we do have a new episode of Domus coming to you guys tomorrow morning on Locals in our Locals community. That's isabelbrown.locals.com. Would love to have you guys join us over there. Domus is our series on faith and the church. Obviously from a Christian perspective, but if you are not Christian, you are more than welcome to join us. We are going to be talking about the synod that is happening at the Vatican this week, and what that really means, where the media might be getting some things wrong. And I think it's a really interesting, important conversation to have that the media isn't really covering appropriately, as well as a really interesting message that I heard from my hometown church when I visited Colorado last weekend to see my family. I am sincerely praying for each and every one of you, for your safety, for your families, and for your courage to continue seeking and speaking the truth. Please consider doing the same for me and my fiance and my family as we do the same. And we will see you guys back tomorrow on the stream at 3 p.m. Eastern. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday night, and we'll talk to you soon.